Karen conflict. Colonial era. The outbreak of the Karen conflict has its roots in the British colonial era. In the 19th century, certain Karen hill tribes were Christianized by American missionaries. During the conquering of Burma in the 19th century, the British made use of the existing antagonism between Burmans and Karens. Karen assisted British armies in the Anglo-Burmese Wars. At the same time, it was American missionaries who Christianized Sqa-Karen and helped these Karen to climb higher positions in Burmese society. The Christian Karen developed a loyalist relationship with the British regime. Through Christian education, the Karen were taught English and how to read and write. This process led to Karenization by the British colonial administrative body. Exclusion of ethnic Burmese from the army and other colonial state bodies had a big impact on Burmese resisting the colonial state. Conversion into Christianity. The first American missionary arrived in Burma in 1813. The first Karen was converted to Christianity on May 16, 1828. American Baptists quickly discovered that the Sqa-Karen were more easy to convert to Christianity than the Po. The Po Karen had just been converted to Buddhism en masse before the arrival of the missionaries. The introduction to and the acceptation of Christianity by the Sqa-Karen provided a way to distinguish themselves from Burmese Buddhists. To convert more Karen, the missionaries learned Karen. Subsequently, they modernized the Karen script using the Burmese alphabet. Dr. Jonathan Wade was involved in producing dictionaries and establishing grammar rules for both the Po and Sqa-Karen dialects. In 1853, Dr. Francis Mason published the first Bible in the Sqa-Karen language. A Po Karen Bible was also published by Reverend D. L. Braden. In the period 1860 to 1890, many Karen were converted to Christianity. In 1875, the Baptist College was opened in Rangoon. Later this school would be known as Karen College. Schools were built, and through education the Christian Karen learned English. This group of Karen were thus able to improve their economic, educational and social situation. In 1922, Reverend H. Marshall wrote, "A considerable number of Karen young men and a few young women are college graduates and are leading useful lives in various communities, as may be seen by looking over the list of officers in government positions in the education, forest, police, military and subordinate branches." The American missionaries also tried to explain the origin of the Karen. By this process, the missionaries created the category of Karen and Karen history and traditions. The missionaries modernized the Karen script and translated the Bible into Po and Sqa-Karen. The modernization of the Karen script and the growth in literacy among Sqa-Karen led to a stimulation of secular Karen literature and journals. In 1842, the Baptist Mission began publication in Sqa-Karen of a monthly magazine called The Morning Star, which continued all the way up the takeover of General Ne Win in 1962. The missionaries taught these people to feel group pride and dignity. This in turn led to a Karen national consciousness. The American missionaries particularly focused on the hill tribes and not on the valley peoples of Burma. The loyalist relationship which subsequently developed between the British and these groups of Karen also stemmed from the position these Karen held within Burmese history. Never before had these hill tribe Karen developed their own kingdom or gained any political or economical influence. Aligning themselves with the British was seen as an opportunity to improve their lives. At some point, the thirst for Christian education, as written by a missionary, was so big the Eastern Karen demanded a permanent teacher. Otherwise they would apply to other missionary churches. The relationship between the Karen and the colonial British created much resentment among the Burman population. At the same time, the authority of the Burmese state in the 19th century pushed the Karen more towards the British. Britain did not control the whole of Burma before 1886. In Burmese-controlled territory, Karen were not allowed to educate themselves at these American Baptists established schools. Many Karen were tortured and killed. The Karen who allied themselves to the British and helped them to gain total control of Burma in 1886. Literacy, knowledge of the English language and access to Christian education led the Sqa-Karen to be advantaged over other Karen linguistic groups of Buddhist Karen by the British colonial government. Their Christian identity helped to develop a loyalist relationship with the British. At the same time, Christian missionaries taught these people to be Karen and thus not Burman. The primary result of the Christianization of the Sqa-Karen is the construction of a Karen identity and their political influence over other Karen groups. Due to their improved economical and social status, the Sqa-Karen were the first group of Karen to develop a feeling for a Karen nation. It was this group who created the first Karen political organizations and therefore always dominated the Karen nationalist movement and its organization. Colonial policy and its implications. The British conquered Burma between 1826 and 1886. The Karen provided important military support for the British in these Anglo-Burmese wars. In the First Anglo-Burmese War in 1824 to 1826, Karen provided guidance to British armies. Burmese authorities tried to punish the involved Karen for this. Some Karen fled to areas now occupied by the British or put up some form of resistance. After the British conquered the territory which was to be the future state of Burma, the British colonial state had a hard time pacifying the country. Burmese resisted the authority of the colonial state on a continual basis. After the Burmese capital of Mandalay was conquered by the British in the Third Anglo-Burmese War in 1885 with help of some Karen, Burmese in the southern delta started a rebellion. During this crucial period in which the British proclaimed martial law, American missionaries successfully lobbied to recruit more Karens as auxiliaries to put down Burmese rebellions throughout the colony. The success surprised the British, and the missionaries proudly commented on the results. The colonial policy was driven by the quest for resources for the capitalist market system of the expanding British Empire. The river plains of Burma were used for the production of agricultural products, while the hill areas surrounding these river plains were of much less economic value to the British. The colonial policy based these two political entities developed. Central Burma was governed through direct rule, and the frontier area, where most ethnic minorities lived and still live, was governed through indirect rule. To pacify the country, mainly Indian, Karen and other ethnic minorities were used. The direct and indirect rule policy has had a huge influence on political developments in post-colonial Burma. In the years 1930 to 1932, Burmese rebelled against the colonial state in what became known as Siasan Rebellion. The Karen helped to repress this rebellion. Other rebellions Christian and other Karen helped to suppress were the 1936 student strike and the general strike of 1938. In 1937, Burma finally reached the status of an individual colony. Burma was not to be governed from India from that point onwards. Finally, a space was created to include Burmese people into the colonial administrative and military bodies. The Burmese nationalist movement started developing in the 1920s, and by 1937 saw entering the colonial army as collaborating with the British. Thus the Burmese army continued to be made out of Burma's ethnic minorities. Political organizations of Karen. The Karen were the first ethnic group in Burma to establish political organizations. Already in 1840 the Karen Baptist Convention, KBC, was established. This Christian organization trained Karen at conferences which were attended by Karen who had rarely left their village. The first Karen political organization was established in 1881 and carried the name Karen National Association, KNA. The KNA aimed to represent all Karen regardless of language, religion or location. From the beginning, however, the KNA was dominated by Christian Karen. The Buddhist wing of the Buddhist Karen National Association, BKNA, was only established in 1939. The KNA developed close relations with the British and the BKNA established relations with the Burmese. The KNA assisted the British Army in the last Anglo-Burmese War in 1886. Po Buddhists resisted the efforts of Christian Karen to represent them in any political organization. There were also Po Karen, however, who were a member of the KNA and were represented by them. The KNA became an important political organization in colonial Burma. In the 1920s the Karen nationalist movement, and at the same time the Burmese nationalist movement, gained momentum. Dr. Sansi Po, a lawyer educated in the West and ethnic Karen, made the first public announcement of the Karens' aim to create their own state in 1928. The same year a KNA member, Sava Igi, wrote the Karen national anthem. In 1937 a Karen flag was created, thus symbolizing the Karen peoples as a nation. The colonial government appointed the inauguration day of this flag as a public holiday. The British colonial government endorsed the Karen view of their history by these events. The Karen identified themselves as the first inhabitants of Burma, a claim which has had a variation of political consequences in modern-day Burma. The KNA developed into the Karen National Union or KNU in February 1947, 1 year before independence. The KNU Charter of 1947, like the KNA Charter of 1881, included all Karen, regardless of subgroup, religion or language. In 1947 the KNU formed the armed wing of the KNU, the Karen National Liberation Army or KNLA. The KNU-KNLA has functioned as a government for half a century. running the area of what is known as Karen state practically as a government, including levying taxes. The majority of the Karen never supported an armed conflict and have never affiliated with the armed struggle of the KNU-KNLA. The Karen National Union KNU-controlled areas rarely constitute a Karen majority. Most Karen actually lived outside KNU-dominated territory in the past 6 decades. This fact has always been the main problem for the unification of the Karen in one Karen state. The organizational structure of the KNU has been so successful it has been copied by other insurgent groups in Burma. Each unit of the KNU was self-supporting. Not only the armed units, but also the hospitals and schools were self-supporting. The strength of this strategy is that it is hard to erase such a movement since it is very spread out and lacks a center. The weakness and disadvantage of the KNU has been that KNU units had trouble getting help from their neighboring KNU units.